All right, guys, I am live. I just want to check the thread here, make sure it's working. If you're watching live right now, I just put a comment in the sections, make sure everything's up and running. This is our first live to the point, and I see I'm going. I'm cruising through. So thanks for joining me. I'm Jon Noyes. And this is To the Point, a monthly live video where we're going to be exploring some culturally relevant topics and issues from a Christian worldview. And for our first time together, in an attempt to be to the point, I just want to dive right in, and I want to talk about an issue that I think is, hey Ashton, hey Harmony, awesome, we're up and running. This is fantastic. Okay, for our first time together, I want to talk about an issue that's fundamental. It's central to the Christian worldview as a whole. And here's the point. Everything about the Christian worldview depends on the history of the life of Jesus of Nazareth. Everything. And that history, it's found in 4 historical documents, and we know them as Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, the Gospels, right? And then here's the question that we got to be asking. Can those documents be relied upon to give us a true picture of the important details of Jesus's life? Is the history that we read in the Gospels, is it accurate? Or has the record changed over time? And if it's changed, how much has it changed? So these are some of the questions I just want to kind of talk to you guys a little bit tonight. And due to time restraints and the nature of being to the point, we can't explore every single aspect of this issue. So for a more in-depth treatment, I want to point you somewhere. It's first, go over to str.org. There's so much material over there for free for you. Take a look, use the search function. And I want to announce a brand new thing that's just come out. I think late last night they released it. It's a 5-part course on New Testament reliability. Are the Gospels historically reliable? I think is the title of it. It's hosted by yours truly. And to get to that, it's super simple. Go to training.str.org and sign up for STRU and get all the free updates and get into those classes. And you'll see there's probably now, oh gosh, at least half a dozen classes now, and get involved. It's a lot of fun. And because I can't handle every aspect of this issue, historical, textual reliability, historical reliability of the New Testament, all this stuff in like a half hour or so, I want to point you to the chat. So make sure that while you're in the in listening to me talk, that you're typing in your questions in the chat, because after about 20 or 30 minutes, I'll break and after I share the material, and then I'll do my best to scroll through and pick out your questions and answer those for you. And we can spend some time in Q&A, and make sure you're also paying attention to the chat on the side. Stand to reason. Actually, it's going to be Harmony, because she's amazing. She's going to be posting things in the chat for you guys, maybe some follow-up material and stuff like that. So anyways, I'm going to start off by asking a question, and I ask questions about almost everything, and my questions are kind of blunt. I mean, so I just want to ask you, who cares about the reliability of the New Testament? Who cares if the Gospels are historically accurate? Who cares? Well, I actually think a lot of people care, especially right now at this particular time that we find ourselves in culture. There's a very popular thing that's going on right now on social media. It's on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, all of these things. We have these, I'm putting them in quotes, like celebrity Christians, and not all of them. I mean, I don't know who they all are. But like Abraham Piper, John Piper's son, some Rhett and Link YouTubers, some famous Christian band members, they're doing what's called deconstructing their faith. And what this means is that they grew up in otherwise Christian homes. They came to believe in the Christian worldview. And then through a series of events, they come to not believe in those things anymore. And I totally get that, because I actually had a deconversion of my own, and not from Christianity to something else, but from something to Christianity. I was an atheist for a very long time. And when I was an atheist, I would actually attack the Bible more than anything else. Because I knew that if I could undermine the source of Christian information, everything else would crumble. I saw Christianity as a house of cards, and the historical reliability of the scriptures of the Bible were at the base of that house of cards. And if I pulled one thing out, I knew that that whole house would crumble. And I remember talking to my wife. Her name's Rihanna. I have the best wife in the world. And before we were married, we would talk about her Christian faith. She was Christian, and I would really press her, really, really hard. And I dig into her. I'm shocked that she stuck with me. I would say things like, are you telling me that you believe what the Bible says, that you think that the things that happened in the Bible actually happened in real space-time history? And you actually believe that Jesus rose from the dead. You believe in zombies is what I tell her. Now, she wouldn't say that she believed in zombies, certainly, but she would affirm that she believed in the Bible and everything that it taught. And then when she said that, I would go in for the kill. I'd say, and this is an argument I picked up from Bart Ehrman way back in the day. I'd say, do you know how many words there are in the New Testament? There are about 136,000 words is what I tell her. And I'd say, do you know how many variants, changes, errors there are in the New Testament? And she'd say, no, I have no idea. I'd say, well, there's 300 to 400,000 errors, variants, or changes. And then I'd say to her, don't you think that if God wanted to make a book to reveal his identity to his people, he could do way better than that? I mean, we're talking 2 to 3 times more mistakes than there are words in the New Testament. Couldn't he do better than that? Or maybe you guys have heard the argument, the Bible's just a bunch of myths, or how do you know you can trust the Bible? Or this is one I used to ask all the time, or I just say it, I'd state it. There's no good evidence for Jesus. None. There's no good evidence for Jesus. And it's here, I think, that a lot of people find the beginning to their deconstructing, actually, or this is where a lot of people, I know it's true of me, so I'm just speaking from my personal experience, this is where I would hang my skeptic's hat on this, and for good reason. We should all be asking difficult questions of the historical documents that make up the New Testament. Because if they aren't reliable, well, we shouldn't believe them. Remember at the onset of our time here at our time, truth is our objective. Truth is our objective. I'm not a Christian because it makes me feel good. It certainly hasn't made me any more money. I know that it hasn't made me more popular with friends and family. That's for dang sure. And but I believe it because it's true in an objective sense, and that's always our objective. So if the New Testament's not reliable, we should know it. And so how do we know that the authors were telling the truth? How do we know that what they were recording was history, not myth? I think we have, well, at least 3 reasons to believe this, and the first of them is that the Gospels they sound like written history. How am I going to say this? Okay, so check this out. Okay, some stories they start with like this, and you're watching this, and I know that you're going to know this, right? A long, long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, right? What's that? It's Star Wars. You're yelling it right now. I know you're yelling it out. Star Wars. Yeah. Well, is Star Wars fact or fiction? Was George Lucas, it was seeking, or Steven Spielberg, whoever wrote it, I'm not a big Star Wars guy, I'm so sorry, but like whoever wrote Star Wars, was he seeking to tell a true historical account? Well, no, it's fiction. Star Wars isn't meant to be true, though. It's not meant to be a factual account of real life events. Or how about this one? Some of you might know this one. I know this one because my kids are in a classical school. So once upon a time there lived in a certain village a little country girl, the prettiest creature that was ever seen. And a fact or fiction? Well, that's actually the beginning of Little Red Riding Hood. It's fiction. It's not meant to be true. The author is seeking to teach moral principles that are true through the tale, but the tale itself isn't meant to be true. And when we read them, we kind of pick up on that, right? So okay, that's how it sounds. Okay, so tell me how's this one sound to you? Other stories, they sound like this. They sound, and I wish I could put this text on the screen. I just haven't figured it out yet. Many have undertaken to draw up an account of the things that have been fulfilled among us, just as they were handed down to us by those who from the first were eyewitnesses and servants of the word. With this in mind, since I myself have carefully investigated everything from the beginning, I too decided to write an orderly account for you, most excellent Theophilus, so that you may know with certainty the things you've been taught. Well, that's Luke. That's in the first chapter of Luke, the first 4 verses. Fact or fiction? It sounds like a factual account to me. It doesn't sound like Little Red Riding Hood. It sounds like the author is intending to tell me a true story. And there's certain factors that tip us off to the fact that we think that Luke means to be writing history here. Okay, first, Luke starts by referencing what sounds like real historical events. These events, he says they're based on eyewitness testimony, and that gives accurate information about the life of Jesus through eyewitness testimony. Listen to his words. He says that he's carefully investigated everything from the beginning, that he's written an orderly account. He's gone through and sought to make sure that these things are in the proper place. And then he names a leader, Theophilus. He has a person in mind that he's writing to, Theophilus. Why? So Theophilus would know the certainty of the things that have been taught about the life of Jesus. Like, do you see the difference between Luke and Little Red Riding Hood, Luke and Star Wars? This writing has all the earmarks, all the indications of history. This is the true life story of Jesus of Nazareth. And that's how Luke meant it to be. Well, look, if we flip further in chapter 3 in Luke, he gives us even more historical detail. And listen to this. Okay, he says in chapter 3, he starts up. Okay, now in the 5th year, not the first year, not the 15th year, it's the 15th year. Now in the 15th year, that he gives us an exact year of the reign of Tiberius Caesar. He gives us an exact ruler, not Julius Caesar, Augustus Caesar, but Tiberius Caesar. When Pontius Pilate was the governor of Judea, and he names a place and the exact governor. And Herod was tetrarch of Galilee, and his brother Philip was tetrarch of the region of Iturea. Luke identifies here the exact tetrarchs in the exact locations. That's how history is written. That's historical. That's a historical account. It blows me away when I read this stuff. Okay, so that's the Gospels. They sound like written history. Okay, what's my second reason here that I think that we can know that these are historical accounts is that the New Testament, the writers say that they're written history. They don't leave it up for us to guess. For example, let's look at Peter. For we do not follow cleverly. Most of us know this scripture, right? 2 Peter 1:16. For we do not follow cleverly devised tales when we made known to you the power and the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ, but we were eyewitnesses of his majesty, is what Peter says. He's saying that he and the other disciples didn't invent the accounts of Jesus's life, death, and resurrection. He's saying that, hey, man, I'm telling the truth here. Okay, I was there. I saw it with my own eyes. I hung out with Jesus. I put my arm around him. I shared meals with him. I did these things with him and these other people in these places. Well, let's look at John's writing. John is another primary source historical document that attests to the life of Jesus. And I want you to notice with me here the number of senses that John appeals to. And this is just amazing, okay? What was from the beginning, what we have heard, and what we've seen with our eyes, and what we've looked at and touched with our hands concerning the word of life. What we have seen and heard, we proclaim to you, is what John says in 1 John 1:1-3. Notice that John says that he says, I heard Jesus. I saw Jesus. I touched Jesus. John here was concerned with the facts, not fairy tales. He's not spinning a tale for us to believe principles out of, but he's telling us about a true life account about a certain man. That certain man is Jesus of Nazareth, right? And so that's so we've seen that the Gospels sound like written history. We'd say that the New Testament writers say that they're written history. Well, let's look at the third reason here. The Gospel accounts have the feel of written history. My first reason for saying that they have the feel of written history, they include details. Oh man, I'm not doing well with these things here. Look at that. I'll skip it here. I get caught up because I get so caught up in what I'm saying. It's amazing for my notes. So the gospel accounts have the feel of written history. Okay. First, they include the details of eyewitness testimony. They include times of day. They include weather conditions, local customs, names and places, and more. And you start doing research. I really wish we had more time, but you start doing research even to the names that they use specifically in the different areas where they travel to. History has shown us that those names are accurate to the places that they went at the time that they went there. It's unbelievable, and all of this minutia is included in the author's writings, because they were writing history, right? They also included really embarrassing details. The disciples are petty oftentimes. I mean, when I'm reading it, I just got done with Mark at church. They seem petty, super slow to understand, sometimes dense, a lot of time arrogant, unfaithful is a word that you categorize for a lot of their 3 years as they walked with Jesus. James and John, I don't know if you remember this, but in Luke 9, I forget where they're leaving, but it's an unbelieving town, and they want to rain fire. That they say, Lord, do you want us to command fire to come down from heaven to consume them? And it's just like, Jesus looks at him and it's like, what are you saying? And gives him a harsh rebuke. Why would they include that if it wasn't true? Or how about Peter denying Christ? Or how about the rest of the disciples fleeing? Or how about the women being the first to declare the empty tomb and the risen Jesus? Why include these unflattering details if the Gospels are just works of fiction? I don't think that they would. And why wouldn't they? Well, because, we don't want to embarrass ourselves. We don't want to immortalize ourselves in embarrassment. No way. What the question I'd have to ask is, what's the motivation? What motivation would the writers have to lie? And I've always thought that this is like something I've always thought about. There's a basic rule about lying, and every one of us lies. And I'm not giving you instructions on how to lie, so please don't go out and lie. Lying is bad. But the basic principle to telling a good lie is that you tell a lie that makes you look good or gets you something good. J. Warner Wallace, another Christian apologist, he does a great job at saying from his detective days, he draws in this principle that people lie for three reasons: for money, sex, and power. And I think that that's generally true, and I take it a step further and just say, you don't tell a lie that doesn't get you something beneficial, right? Certainly you don't tell a lie that gets you beaten with rods or whipped or stoned or crucified upside down or beheaded or exiled on an island. Those aren't good lies if that's what's happening. Those are bad lies. Don't tell those lies, right? And think about what happened to the disciples. A Christian tradition, and this is Sean McDowell's done a great amount of work. He did his PhD on the fate of the apostles, and he would say that tradition tells us that Peter was crucified. I'm going to read this list here. Peter was crucified. So was Andrew. James, the brother of Jesus, was beheaded. Philip was crucified. Bartholomew was filleted to death in Armenia. James the Greater was beheaded. Matthew died by the sword. Matthias was stoned to death. Thomas was stabbed by spears. John died after exile. Luke was hanged. James the Just was thrown in prison and beaten. Mark was dragged to death by horses. And Paul was beheaded by Nero in Rome. Friends, the earliest disciples, they signed their testimony in their own blood. Why would they lie? If they did lie, they were awful liars. So what's the point? Let's get to the point. Can the witnesses be trusted? Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And for the three reasons I listed, the gospel accounts, they sound like written history. The New Testament authors say it's written history, and the gospel accounts have the feel of written history. But our time's not done. Okay, our time's not done, because we have another question that we have to ask. What if the words, this is all assuming that the words that we have are accurate, what if the words in the New Testament aren't actually the words of these authors? What if the documents have been tampered with? What if the documents have changed over time? These are the questions based on what I think is actually a misunderstanding about how ancient documents were handed down. And it's something that I used to use all the time when I was like trying to squish my Christian friends, and most of the time it worked because I didn't know what I was saying. Really, to be honest with you, I hadn't done a bunch of research into this, and neither had my Christian friends. So as an atheist, I bring this up all the time. I'd always relate how we got the documents today to something called the telephone game. And I think that every one of us now knows what the telephone game is, right? It's that idea that one person says a sentence to their neighbor, a singular person, and they whisper it into their ear, and then that person passes it on, and then down the line it goes. And the last person usually stands up and they announce what he thought was whispered to him, and it's nothing like the original. I mean, it's nothing. Usually it's something ridiculous that makes very little sense. and everybody gets a big laugh. Well, that's how I would have said that the Gospels were passed down, and that's how I think a lot of people think that the Gospels are passed down. And while it might make sense in our minds at first, it's completely wrong. It's just not how it happens. There's a fundamental misunderstanding with the telephone game illustration, and I'm going to tell you why. Because it assumes a line of people passing the message verbally by their voices from one person to the next, but that's not how it was done. And let me give you a better illustration to kind of think about. Okay, I say you have a class of 35 or 40 third graders, right? Mrs. Thompson's third grade class, and Mrs. Thompson, she goes up to the whiteboard and she writes out a long paragraph on the whiteboard. Now, and she says to her students, she says, "Hey guys, carefully copy this paragraph, word for word, punctuation for punctuation, on a sheet of paper." She tells her students that their grade for the full semester depends on copying the paragraph exactly as it is on the board. Any mistake will get you docked a point. Don't make any mistakes and take your time, as much time as you need. They all take their time. They do it in like 10 minutes. They copy down this paragraph. And when they're done, Mrs. Thompson, she erases the board. It's all gone. Now, what happened to the original? It's gone, and it's gone forever. It's wiped clean, And now she tells her students, "Hey, I want you to change your paper with your neighbor." And she does that. And she says, "Okay, now I want you to copy your neighbor's paper, word for word, punctuation mark for punctuation mark, and your grade depends on how well you do it." And then when they're finished, she tells them to tear up that copy that they got from their neighbor and exchange the second copies with one another and do the exercise over and over and over again. Okay, the teacher, she repeats, Mrs. Thompson, she repeats the same exercise 5 or 6 or 7 times, having the students destroy the previous copies. All the previous copies are in the trash. When they're done, where's the original? It's gone. We already said that. Well, where are the 5 or 6 or 7 generations of copies? They're gone. They're torn up in the trash. All gone. All they have left are copies of copies of copies of copies. Now, here's the point. Do you think Mrs. Thompson's third grade class will be able to reconstruct the original paragraph? I think they can. And I think it's pretty simple, actually, because what they'll do is they'll compare the 35 remaining copies to one another. Will there be some differences? Absolutely. I'm sure of it. But even if there are mistakes, when they closely compare all the copies, it's going to be pretty obvious where those mistakes are. They're going to jump out. Even if you have some knucklehead third grader like me in the class, I was a knuckleheaded third grader, and I would have either made tons of spelling mistakes, I can't spell to save my life, or I was that knucklehead that would have inserted a line about, natural habitat of snapping turtles. I would have inserted a line, "John is the best," or something like that. Well, those mistakes would jump right out because it'd be only in the copies that got passed that I passed. Excuse me. So do you see the difference between the telephone game and the exercise with the third graders in Mrs. Thompson's class? It's actually, I think, relatively easy to reconstruct the originals, even if you have only copies of copies of copies of copies. And when I used to bring that objection up, I'd throw that in the Christian's face. Well, you just have copies of copies of copies of copies of copies. Well, that's okay. And this is because this is exactly what scholars do. What I just described to you, that process, they look closely at all the copies that are available to them, and then they reconstruct the originals based on those copies. And I'm not talking about this. This is just, this is how they do it with the Bible. No, this is how they do it with the New Testament documents. Sure. But this is how they do it with all ancient history. This is how they do it to get the text of the Iliad and the Odyssey, or anything from Josephus or Shakespeare. We don't have any of Shakespeare's original writings. None. So this is how we have to do it. This is how scholars do it, and they got to do it with the Gospels, just like every other work from antiquity, And it's not the telephone game. That's not what it is. It's a carefully crafted, sophisticated academic process that has a name. It's called textual criticism. Some of you probably know exactly what that is. Scholars, what they do is they reconstruct the original text, basically the same way as the third graders did in the illustration. They take all of the known copies of any ancient work, and then they compare them to see how well they match. and then they highlight where they don't match to see what the original text should say. And now in this process, there's two really, really important elements that I just need to mention briefly. The first of them is it's important how many copies they have for comparison. You see, the more copies we have, the better. Lots of copies make it easier to reconstruct the original because you have more to compare across one another. I mean, a lot more work for the textual critic, but it's also the results are better because you have more to compare. Second, you also want the copies, or as many of the copies, as close to the original as possible. The smaller the gap of time between the original and the copy, the less time there is for error really to creep in. So you want lots of copies, and you want copies that date close to the originals. So how many copies of the documents do you have for comparison? Guys, we have a lot. Like a lot. Between the 1st and the 15th centuries, we have thousands and thousands of pages of partial and complete New Testament manuscripts. How close in time are those copies to the originals? Guys, we have portions of the Gospels that date within 100 years of the originals. Not full Gospel copies. No, we have fragments. But it's unbelievable just the same. And then we have complete New Testament the manuscripts dating to 303, 350 AD. And then there's new discoveries that are happening all the time. So the information is even getting better and better and better. So never have we been more sure about what the New Testament says than we have today, because it's just getting better and better with more and more discoveries. So what's the point? What's the significance of these large numbers of relatively early copies, and in relatively early dates of tons of copies of the Gospels? I think that we know the significance of these things by comparing the New Testament documents to other works of antiquity, and I just want to say, I'm not going to go through specifics here, but the average time gap for ancient writers between the original and the earliest copy, these are contemporaries or later, maybe slightly earlier than the New Testament. The average time gap is 500 years. That's the average. Okay. So if you're reading ancient history of any kind, really, you're relying on history that's not even that's not really comparable to the history that we have for the New Testament. Herodotus, Tacitus, Pliny, all of these guys, and we're talking hundreds of years removed. With minimal numbers of copies, a couple hundred maybe, and I think that's an amazing feat. The gospel evidence, and this is really the point. The gospel evidence is overwhelming by comparison to other works of history, but what about these differences? Because I'm not saying, and like I said, truth is our goal. I'm not saying that there aren't any differences. There are. Remember when I said as an atheist, I adopted Bart Ehrman's argument, 136,000 words, 300 to 400,000 variants and mistakes and whatnot. That's true. Those things are true, guys. They are. Let's fess up. I mean, they're true. But in order to understand the significance of those numbers, it sounds like a lot, but let's we got to understand the nature of the variants. The variations, they're not all the same. There's first you have variations, for example, that simply don't matter. And even Bart Ehrman would say that is the vast majority of the variants that we're talking about. Of the 300 to 400,000, they fall into this range. They're variations that just simply don't matter. Spelling differences, abbreviations, nonsense readings, like a skipped line, insignificant word change order, like Christ Jesus as opposed to Jesus Christ. Right? These variances, they have absolutely no bearing on our ability to reconstruct the original text. And then they certainly don't change any meaning. And then the second, so those are variations that just simply don't matter. The second, we have variations that matter, but they're not viable, is what we say. They're not viable. So what they would do is they'd give a very different understanding of the text, but it's not a problem, because they're obvious mistakes. It's like having Jon Noyes in your third grade class inserting "John is the best." Nobody ever thinks that line would be in the original. They're obvious mistakes. They're errors everybody knows about. Off the top of my mind, so long ending of Mark 16. or the woman caught in adultery in John 8. We know through textual criticism that those are not in the originals. But notice that we know that they're not in the originals. That means we must know what the original is. It's just an interesting point. There's a third type of variation within the text, and these are variations that matter, and they are viable. And this is really where the task of textual criticism comes in, with a sophisticated process that help weed out the mistakes. So of the approximately 200 or 20,000 lines that make up the New Testament, 40 of those 40 lines are in doubt. It's about 400 words in total, and none of them affect any significant doctrine. None of them affect the historicity of the New Testament. Certainly none of them affect the intricate details of Jesus's life, and most importantly, his resurrection. So simply stated, we can reconstruct the New Testament as originally written with a fair amount of certainty, actually. And where there are question marks, because there are question marks, guys, where there are question marks, none of those question marks call into doubt any major Christian doctrine. And I really do. I wish that we had more time to dig deeper into this issue, because it's just really cool. And I wish that I could go in more in depth about, even what critics have to say, or what archaeology has to say, or answer some of the major objections. But maybe we can do that in the chat. But before I get to some of your questions in the chat, I want to make sure I point you back again over to training.str.org. And you can watch the new 5-part video course on this very topic by yours truly. Tim Barnett just dropped a new course there too on why apologetics. You can see stuff, I think, on tactics. There's a homosexuality one with Alan Schleman. I mean, there's a bunch of wonderful material over at STRU. So it's going to be training.str.org, or you can just go to str.org and search around the website and find some awesome resources. Also, if you're watching and you want to bring something like this to your church, make sure you contact me, and you can do that through the website. You can go to my speaker profile page, and I'd love to partner with you and then get something going at your church or any event that you're doing. As things start to open up, we're starting to get back on the road again, which is a lot of fun. And I love presenting this stuff and more. So you can go to my speaker profile page. You can check out the topics of my talks, and I'd love to partner with you in any way you see fit. So with that, let me see here. Yeah. So what's the point? Okay. It's super simple. If you're going to take something away, what's the point? The Christian worldview is based on the life of Jesus, and we get that information from the New Testament and the Gospels more specifically. We have good reason to believe that those things, the New Testament and the Gospel, are historically accurate, and we can trust what we read in them. Now I'm gonna maximize my screen here and take a look at the comments and see what we got. And wow, dude, there's like people from everywhere. The training, dude, Patty, you got to check out the training stuff. It's unreal. I'm going to leave the bottom and go up to the top here. Hey, Ashton, I think I said that. Meg's watching. Meg's my boss, so I better be doing good. Head over to str.org. Harmony wrote me some stuff. Let's see here. Any questions? If you guys got questions, who does my hair? You know what? It's really expensive. It's really expensive. I am a proud member of the Dollar Shave Club, I think is what it is. Actually, my wife signed me up for like my birthday or something. So yeah, it's good stuff, right? I hope it doesn't do too much shine. But anyways, yeah. Are there good books or papers on the early dating of the Gospels? Yes, absolutely, Ashton. So you want to check out Mike Lacona's tome on this. It's the resurrection of, I think it's the resurrection of Jesus. Or the resurrection, yeah. And then N.T. Wright also has a wonderful book, The Resurrection of the Son of God. I get them confused sometimes. Habermas. So go to GaryHabermas.com. This isn't even a book that you need to purchase. You can just look on his website, and he has so much free information right there for you. Dude, I really wish I just moved, so all my books are packed still hopefully by the next live stream next month. I'll have them unpacked. But I'd start with Lacona. I really love Lacona. I love Habermas, Dan Wallace. He has so much material out there. So I'd start there. Those are the books that I'd start with. Let's see here. I hope I answered that question for you, Ashton. Thanks for tuning in, bro. Let's see. I see Stand the Reason comment in there. Harmony, you're amazing. You need a raise. Good evening, Patty. That's Patty. And then excellent information. Yeah, I'm glad you liked it. New York. All right. Hope you're a Mets fan. No, I'm just kidding. We're all brothers here, you know. So hey, what's up, Don from New York? I'm from the East Coast as well, if you couldn't tell. Patty, you're currently meeting. Let's see if I can look at this. I'm currently meeting with 2 Mormon missionary young women, and they believe the Bible has been corrupted. Yeah, Mormons would. So we talk about the documentary evidence for sure. Yeah. Hey, Patty, I actually, you know what? Like, if you can get in touch with me through the website, I wrote a paper on this, on the Mormon belief. They believe in an apostasy, an early apostasy, actually, that they think, they think Paul apostate. It was an apostasy. Like, they think that he would, even as early as his first century Christians lost their way. So that's great. I'm so glad to hear that you're meeting with the Mormons. I love having Mormons in the house. They don't really come by anymore. Although, like I said, I just moved, so maybe they'll start coming by again. That's like one of my favorite parts about moving. I get the Jehovah's Witnesses and the Mormons coming back over, and I love having them over. Mormons are great. Mormons are awesome because there's a lot of great common ground to be had, and I actually feel for them, because remember, most of the time people, the folks that come into your door are 18, 19, 20-year-old kids, really. I hate saying that because it makes me feel old, but they are, they're on a mission. Many times they're home, they're away from home for the first time. So I usually try to take it easy with them, but I certainly love talking about the documentary evidence. Actually, if you go to Brigham Young's University, BYU's website, you can start to find there's papers on there saying, by BYU profs, saying that the history involved in Mormonism is false. And I've had experience now where I'll keep 10 of those papers printed out by my door. So when they come, I'll just hand them the paper and say, hey, this isn't written by me. This isn't written by anybody I know. This is written by one of your guys at your institution. And they'll actually take it. And I'm hoping that they read it, but that's great. I'm glad that you're, yeah, Donnie, that's a great question to ask. Sarah Jon Noyes. Are you an atheist? No, I am not an atheist. I was an atheist, but God, by no work of my own, saw fit within his own will to reach down into my darkness and tear me up to his marvelous light. And I praise him every day for that. I used to be an atheist. I was an atheist for the start of my young adult life. I became a Christian 14 years ago. So, yeah. And I used to love to debate Christians, and I'd bring this stuff up all the time. All the time I'd bring this stuff up. This is where I'd start. I'd start with the Bible and Jesus. And, most of the time, to be honest with you, the Christians that I talked to some of them knew scripture really well, which is great. But most of the time they didn't really know what I was talking about. And actually, as it turns out, in full disclosure, I don't think I probably knew exactly what I was talking about. I read a couple books and listened to a lot of lectures, and I kind of just regurgitated the information. And then what happened is when I met Rihanna, she actually asked me to go to church with her, which was a super weird experience. Church, if you're not churched and you go to church, if you didn't grow up in the church and you go to church as an adult, it's just for me, it was strange. It was an awesome church. We became members there. I got saved there. But it was a weird experience. And, but that caused me to really press in and lean into my worldview of atheism, naturalism. And when I did that, and I started dropping some of the presuppositions that I always brought to the table that I held without really knowing that I was holding presuppositions, I started from the place of naturalism. I wasn't neutral. And when I dropped those presuppositions, specifically in respect to the resurrection of Jesus, and that necessarily entails the historical reliability of the Gospels. I was really surprised at what I found, and it led me on a 3 or 4 month journey where I read the Bible, Genesis to Revelation. While riding, I didn't have a driver's license. I lived in Hollywood and worked downtown at a law firm, and and read the Bible cover to cover while on the train. And at the same time, I was reading different books by different Christian apologists, and listening actually to Greg Koukl. I don't know if you guys know that guy. He's pretty good. And this other guy, J. Warner Wallace, before he was Cold Case Christianity, he was Please Convince Me. And I was listening to them nonstop, and they were just putting those stones in my shoe. And one thing led to another, and it was I praise God. So anyways, yeah, I used to be an atheist. When exactly were they corrupted? Because they have a lot of copies that match each other. Speaking and asking, and yeah, so you guys, Patty and Donnie. So Donnie, the question you're asking, I think that this has to do with the when did they believe that the scriptures were corrupted? And they would say very, very early on, they were corrupt. So yeah, there's a lot to talk about there. Let's see here. Former atheist. That's good. You corrected them. Thank you. Stand to reason. Patty, I believe. You guys are so funny. I love this. This is like amazing. I love going back and reading these comments. I hope they stay forever and ever. Yeah. Let's see if you guys have any questions. I'm coming down to the Portland, Oregon. Hey, if you're up in Portland, Victor, I don't know if you know, but we have a conference, a student apologetics conference that we just started last year. Was our first. Oh, not in Portland, Oregon. Sugar. It's Seattle, Washington. That's a bummer. But actually, it's not that far of a drive. I don't think it's closer than driving down to Orange County. That's for sure for our Reality Apologetics Conference. And if any of you guys are anywhere near any of the hubs, I think we've got one in Alabama, Dallas, Texas, Orange County, Minneapolis, Minnesota, Seattle, Washington. I'm sure I'm forgetting one or two. If you're in the Northeast, we want to get one started. So you need to contact us, and we'd love to bring it up to you guys. But if you guys haven't ever come to our Reality Apologetics Conference, I think the official title is Reality Student Apologetics Conference. It's geared towards students, but I got to tell you, I used to bring one before I was at STR. I was a pastor, and I wasn't a youth pastor, but I would always try to gather as many youth as I could to bring them down to this conference. On a selfish regard, it was kind of because I wanted them to be exposed to the information, but I wanted to go because the information's unbelievable. I mean, where can you go and you hear Greg Koukl, Alan Schleman, Tim Barnett? At the time it was Brett Kunkel. You'd have J. Warner Wallace. You'd have Christopher Yuan. I mean, you would have the best of the best of the best. Present Abdu Murray. I mean, these guys are just like untouchable. They're unbelievable. And they're all presenting in the course of 2 days, and then still the same now. And it's just such a great time. So if you guys are within striking distance, I know that I think you can start registering for some of them. Our first one's here in Southern California in just under 3 months away. So I'm not sure if you can register yet, but make sure you do that. Anyways, okay. Let's see. Where are we going? Nothing. No questions. You guys have any questions? I can hang for another couple minutes. This is like the best to the point. Oh, wait, here we go. I mean, how do you respond? How do you respond to those who say that the Bible is just a bunch of fragments used to grab power? Oh boy. Yeah, that's a good question. Okay, so here's how I'd start that. It depends who I'm talking to, but if I know the person, I'd actually find common ground with them. And this is something called moving towards the objection. This is a tactic that Greg writes about in Tactics, his newer. I think I don't know if it's in his older version. I know it's in the 10-year anniversary version. If you don't own that, you've got to. It's like you have to. It's like not owning a Bible. Well, it's not really, but yes. Anyways, go buy Tactics. So move towards the objection. I'd say, you know what? People have abused the scriptures to grab power in the past, in history. That's totally true. But what do you mean that the Bible's just a bunch of fragments? Because, I mean, we have good evidence. I mean, we don't have to rely on fragments. We have the earliest complete copies of the New Testament that date really, really early. I mean, we're talking 200 years after Jesus, 300 years after Jesus. We have complete New Testament copies. So what do you mean by fragments? Just a bunch of fragments. It's not. It's actually the Bible is 66 independent corroborative pieces of historical documentation. Across different genres of literature, sure, but they all tell one unified story. I mean, told by. I mean, you have authors who are peasants. You have authors who are kings. You have authors who are fishermen. You have authors who are some of the best, arguers or rhetorians of the day, and they all combine together to tell one unified story across 1,500 years or so about the coming of the Messiah, Jesus Christ. It's unbelievable. So that's how I'd respond. Just a bunch of fragments used to grab power. People do use it to grab power. I'm sure the disciples didn't. That's for sure. So let's talk about the evidence of what we have. I mean, Jesus didn't. I mean, Jesus didn't come to serve, to be served, but to serve. Right? He humbled himself to the point of a cross, is what he said. So that's not what Christianity is about, and that's not what the Bible's about. It's not about abusing power, but we can trust what it says because there's good evidence for it. That's how I think respond off the cuff to that. Harmony says I'm doing good. That's good, but that was early on. Oh no, that wasn't early on. That was like 10 minutes ago. That's good. Let's see here. Any other questions? Comment on arguments. Let's see. It's used for power. Here, this is a follow-up to I think what I just said. Where in the scripture does it say to use? It doesn't say it in the scripture. Let's be clear. It does not say that. But people do use the scriptures to grab power. I'm thinking of it's an abuse. It's an abuse of the scriptures. So Donnie, that's a good clarification. I'm glad that I'm glad I saw that. I'm glad that you typed that in, because but it is. I mean, just people will use anything for their own personal gain. Ultimately, if given to their own devices, even the Bible. So you have the scriptures and that's only reason why I find common ground with the person and move towards the objection is it takes the tension kind of out of it, and it also kind of puts sometimes people on their heels. If I come to somebody, nobody ever uses it for power. It doesn't ever happen, and well, that's not really the merit. That's not really where the argument for me stands. The argument doesn't stand what fallen, broken people use the Bible for. Yeah, they do, but let's talk about what we have and why we can trust what we have. And even in doing that, you start to understand human nature a little bit better, and you start to understand that person, and you start to understand the people who might want to be grabbing power. But yeah, so there is no scripture that says use my word to grab power, because that's not what we should be doing. And that's an abuse. I hope that helps. Let's see here. Comment on the arguments that the literary features of the New Testament do not conform to those of first century, rather the later centuries in a matter of language style. Yeah, okay, that's a great question, Matthew. I've heard otherwise. I actually, if you want a really good in-depth on this, again, you go back to Lacona. I haven't finished her book, but Lydia McGrew and Lacona don't, I think, necessarily see eye to eye on a bunch of that stuff. I'm just going to remove this comment just because I'm seeing my nose, my eyes, but the Lydia McGrew has a great book out on that. This topic is addressed in it, but then also Lacona addresses this in his book that he just came out with, where he compares the New Testament documents to Plutarch's writings, and I come to a different conclusion here. They do conform to first century people, specifically writing history, even and even in their liberties, so to speak, in their writing style, whether it be they're using certain literary techniques like time compression or whatnot, moving events around or something like that. Then you see that as a standard during the time. So when we read history, right? When last year, I love to read. Last year was a big biography year for me. So I read a bunch of different biographies, a bunch of people that I wanted to know about. And so when I'm reading a biography on Abraham Lincoln, I expect it to be a certain way, right? traditionally, a biography in the 20th century should read from the beginning of the person's life to their death, and then key events in between them, right? So that's how we read it. But that wasn't necessarily true of ancient histories. They didn't necessarily record things that way. They use different literary techniques, excuse me, and stuff like that. So that's what I have to say. That I hope that answers the question. Comment on an argument that the literary features of the New Testament do not conform to those of the first century, rather of the later centuries in the manner of language, style, etc. I think that from what I've understood to be true is that they do conform to early other historical documents written during the same time, contemporaries. People just say things to ignore the Bible. They do. Yes, they do. John, do you know anything about Japan in regards to sharing the gospel? I know. Yeah. I mean, I know. I know that it's an honor shame culture. So when you're not going to appeal necessarily to the law, you can, but the law is not going to have the same type of appeal that it would here in a Western culture, where we're more of a legal, a law gospel type culture. So if you want a good book on this, 3D Gospel. It's called the 3D Gospel, and it's short. I mean, you could probably read it in a day if you sit down and just read it. It's not heavy, but it discusses it's a book for missions. So it discusses the different types of cultures that are out there and the different ways that you're going to try to speak to people from different cultures, because they're going to mean different things to people. And I remember one of the examples that brought about in Eastern culture where it's honor shame was having to do with like a young woman who's violated, right? On the way home from school, a woman takes a taxi and she's violated. Here, the woman will go to the cops or certainly tell somebody, and that's like normal. And well, in Eastern culture, there's a shame that's associated with that for the woman. And I guess there is a little bit here, but not like it is on the Eastern culture. And so knowing how to discuss these types of issues in that setting is really important. That's a great question. But no, so that's from the Paladin. John, do you know anything about Japan in regards to sharing the gospel in their culture? Very, very little. Who would be a great resource is actually Christopher Yuan. If you don't know who he is, you've got to. Christopher Yuan, Y-U-A-N is his last name. He's phenomenal. He's a really good friend, and he's done some really great stuff, but he's Chinese, I believe. So he's Eastern, and might have some more stuff on that. But that's a really good question. It's so cool to be thinking about other cultures and how it's so interesting how the message is relevant, right? The message is relevant to the other cultures because the need is still there. But the way we communicate it might be slightly different according to what culture you're in. That's a great question. I wish I was more help on that. Missy, let's see here. Repost Q. Is there a straightforward way to handle the argument of Bart Ehrman? It always seems like a daunting conversation. Thanks for the great work. So the argument for Bart Ehrman, I'm assuming that you're referencing the argument that I used to use. 136,000 words in the New Testament, 300 to 400,000 variants. Again, though, it's the same tactic. You move towards the objection. You are, you know what, Bart? You're absolutely right. Let me ask you, how many of those variants change a fundamental doctrine or teaching of the Christian faith? You know what he would say? None. And you know why I know he would say that? Because he said that. He said that in a debate that he had with Lacona, and he's also said it in Misquoting Jesus. I think he outrightly says that that none of the variants change a fundamental component of Christianity. Now now let's be fair. He doesn't obviously believe everything to be true that's recorded in the New Testament documents. If he did, he'd be a Christian, right? But he does believe that the as far as I'm aware, he does believe that the documents themselves, the primary source documents, are he would say, what did he say? Very broadly is what he said. Very broadly historically reliable is what he would say. So that's how I address it. You move towards the objection. You say, you know what? You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. What you're saying is true. There are a lot of variants, but here's the variance. Here's the variance. And what do they mean? And then in the last half hour, I talked about the 3 different types of variants. You have the ones that are inconsequential, right? They're a spelling mistake or something like that. Then you have ones that are consequential, but they're non-viable, meaning it's just obvious that they don't belong, like the woman at the well or caught in adultery and the long ending of Mark 16. So those we know that they're variants. We know that they're not there in the original. But also notice, and this is just like, I mean, these are just my own thoughts right now, and I think I might have said it during our time. Notice like that we don't know that they're there, meaning we know what should be there, right? Like knowing that it doesn't belong there means we know that what should be there, because we have a standard to set it up to, right? So knowing something doesn't belong there is also a case for we know what's supposed to be in the originals. So it's a great thing. So that's how I handle the Ehrman objection. Thank you for all this, John. I can't wait to listen to this video. Oh, thanks, Ashton. Yo, you got to check out the course, man. Know what the course at training.str.org. It's so cool because I'm just me. I'm just one guy, like, really grateful, having fun, being able to be used in this capacity. And then you get teamed up with the folks that help make everything happen, like behind the scenes. You've got so many people behind the scenes that stand to reason, like working. It's not that we have a big staff; it's just everybody's involved in everything. and Greg Cash specifically, our videographer, he's like super legit, and he just makes me look awesome, and he makes everybody look really good. But you got to check out those videos because they're super good, man. They're super good. Harmony. Do we know who to trust, given that people like Bart Ehrman seem to be experts with their own arguments? Yeah. Oh, great question. There are a lot of smart people. There are a lot of smart people who don't believe like us. There's a lot of smart people. I mean, so many, right? But there's also a lot of smart people who do. So it's like, so who do we trust? How do we trust it? Well, that's the hard part. And that's where we got to put the time in. Me and you, right? We're blooming where we're planted, is what Greg would say, right? We bloom where we're planted. This is the thing. Okay. With the mindset that truth is my ultimate goal. God tells me to test all things, holding fast to that which is true, right? God wants me to move towards the questions that I have. He doesn't want me to stay in the questions. He doesn't want me to feed my doubt, but it's not that he doesn't want me to doubt. Let me remind you that doubt and is not disbelief. Doubting is good. How do I know doubting is good when it's done properly? Because it's all over the scriptures. John the Baptist doubted. Read in Matthew when John is sitting in prison. He's about to die. He's about to lose his head. And he sends his own disciples to, this is John the Baptizer, right? Not John the Apostle. John the Baptizer. He sends his disciples to go ask Jesus what? He says, hey, go ask Jesus if he's the Messiah, or am I still waiting for another one? And it's just like, oh man, even now you've given everything up. I mean, you went into the wilderness and ate locusts and honey and dressed in camel's hair. I mean, it sounds super uncomfortable on a number of levels. And you're willing to do that, and you're still asking if Jesus is the Messiah. I mean, I would have figured that out before I left my house and started living in the wilderness, but he didn't. He moved towards that, and then he had a question. He was doubting. And what does Jesus do? Does Jesus rebuke him? Does his disciples say, hey, John has this question for you? And is Jesus like, I can't believe this John guy. What a jerk. No. He says, never has there been a man more commemorable than this John. Never. And he just lifts John up, like on this like up high. And it's because he asked the question, notice, so we struggle with these things. And then that's, I guess where I'm going with that is that yeah, there's a lot of smart people that say a lot of things. And there's a lot of smart people who say a lot of good things. There's also a lot of smart people that say a lot of silly things. I think that I am fairly intelligent. I used to say the stupidest things. I just did, because I just did, so it's not necessarily about what person's saying what, it's about what they're saying. And when Bart Ehrman brings up an argument that has you question, has you shaken in your faith tomb stocks, whatever, tube stocks, dig into it. Dig into it. Read what Bart Ehrman says. Read. Don't necessarily just watch videos and stuff. Read, and then find an answer, and then read that too. Testing all things, and then hold fast to that which is true. So you struggle through it. Find a partner too. I mean, hopefully you guys go to good churches where you can wrestle with these things outwardly. You don't want to hold it all inside. You want to express it. You get rid of the stigma of doubting, as long as you're doing it well. And another thing is you want to feed your faith, not your doubt. Feed your faith, not your doubt. So turn to good resources and good materials. STR.org is one of them. Cold Case Christianity, Frank Turek. I mean, these guys. Greg Koukl. I mean, are you kidding me? He's he's got to be one of the smartest people I've ever met. And he addresses Ehrman all the time. So it's not necessarily about the smart people, but I will tell you that it seems to me like in academia and the ivory towers of our culture are kind of ruled by naturalism right now. One, that doesn't mean it's true. That's a fallacious argument, right? So what's that argument from authority, or genetic fallacy? That's not. That just because the majority of professors are atheists, which I don't even know if it's true, doesn't mean it. But there's a truth there that there's a lot of professors that are waiting for students. If you're a student, they're waiting for you. I know that from experience. I know it for a fact. So you want to get equipped. You want to get empowered. You want to do the research and the legwork. It's hard at first, but once you learn how to read and enjoy it, it gets a lot easier. So I hope that answers your question. Harmony's rad. Rad. She's on staff at STR. Let's see here. Thank you all for all this, John. I can't wait. I would believe Plato, though. Thanks for that, John. Slightly more theological question. All right, and then this is going to be the last one, and then I got to go, I think. Slightly more theological question. What's your opinion on preaching from passages like John 8 and the long ending of Mark? Should these be avoided since they're probably not in the autographs? This is a really good question. Okay. John 8, we preached with a note about it. The long ending of Mark at my church. This is just, I also pastor a church here in Southern California called Soli Church. And I'm one of four pastors, and we planted it 2 years ago. And we just ended preaching through Mark. And when I preached on Jesus's crucifixion, and so I had the end of Mark, and I did not preach on the long ending. We didn't even acknowledge it. Why? Why didn't we do that? That's because me and the other pastors got together and we decided that in the context of a church service, if we brought up the issue, it might cause more confusion because we don't have adequate time to handle it. So we've resolved to handle it in a different setting eventually, hopefully. But yeah, I think we preached on. Oh, man, I don't know if we preach on John 8. I don't know. That's a good question. That if you preach on it, I would say that there should be a mention of the place that like the evidence for the verse not necessarily being in the original. I would take that time. So if you preach on it, it should come with the warning. But if you skip it, I think that's completely legitimate too. But I'm not going to say that there's a real right way or wrong way here. I'm not going to be dogmatic like that, because number one, being past is hard. Somebody's always telling you you're wrong. Number two, hey, as long as you're trying to faithfully preach the word of God and you're being faithful to the text, I could see benefits of preaching both of those passages. I think it's important that you as a preacher understand that those passages aren't most likely aren't in the originals. But keep in mind, they are in early copies. And every Bible that we own, I cannot believe it, I don't have a Bible like right here next to me. I need to get unpacked. That's like odd. I don't have a Bible right in front of me. Every Bible worth its weight's going to have a footnote there too. So hopefully we're producing self-feeders at church. Hopefully they're able to, as the pastor's preaching, we're able to look at the footnotes and say, wait a second, what's that mean? And then maybe that again, test all things, hold fast till it's true. Start reading it. I know so many people that the long ending of Mark caused a huge problem with. That's why I didn't preach it. I didn't even mention it because it caused a little bit of a mess when I brought it up in apologetics class, and I ended up having to spend, this is at my last church, I ended up having to spend like 3 weeks teaching on this stuff. New Testament reliability, which is great. I'm not complaining at all. But from the pulpit, you're not afforded that kind of time. And you can't kind of like just stop what you're doing and say, oh no, we're just going to do something else today. So that's a great question. Slacker. It is hard, man. You know what? If you're not praying for your pastors, you should. Because I can tell you most of them, they're not doing it for the money. I know that, and it's hard, man. Being a pastor is hard, but it's awesome too. And so is working here at STR. This is like my dream job. I'm doing my dream job right now, which is unbelievable. So yeah, with that, guys, I'm gonna sum it up right now. Thank you for joining me here at To The Point. The point being, guys, everything in the Christian worldview depends on the life of Jesus of Nazareth. The details of his life are told in the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Those are the primary source documents, and we can trust what they say because they're historically reliable, not according to Christian standards, according to historical standards. Keep that in mind, and keep thinking through these issues, guys. I thank you so much. Make sure you check out the new courses over at training.str.org. And if you guys are looking to bring one of us speakers to your church or an event, please reach out to us. My calendar is totally open at this point. So I'm looking forward to getting back on the road. All right, guys, thank you so much. Get out there, contend for the Christian worldview, and I love you all. Talk to you in a bit.